Hello.
Hello.
So first, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am Mariana, and I'm originally from Romania for Sean. And my parents adopted me at age 4. I was in an orphanage, and my birth parents gave me up when I was like the same age. And then they um, they thought adopting, since my mom couldn't have any kids, she thought adoption was a good idea. And so my mom and dad flew out to see me. And it was a lot of papers and everything. But I thought it was worth it was worth all the trials.
Mhm. Um, so what year were you born?
I was born May 13th, 1994.
And when were you adopted?
August 2nd.
You mentioned that you were originally from Romania. So do you have any memories from before your adoption?
I remember I was in a crib and I really wanted to go home. So I was eager to go out.
What do you remember about the adoption process itself?
It was really long, and they had to go through all the evaluation, making sure I was clear to go, and that's when all the government was going in, and they could usually stop people from Romania or from other country, but then when the rule was set back, they could do the process.
Have your parents ever spoken to you about adoption?
Um, I would say yes. I know they wanted another kid, but and since they had Paul already, so
Could you give a little more detail about who Paul is?
uh, Paul's my brother, and me and him are very close. So that's one of it. But I have other siblings who are adopted too.
Sorry?
I have other siblings who are adopted also to the whole transformation.
Do you mean like siblings from Romania?
Um, I have friends who are adopted to the same orphanage.
Ah,
So, and that's how I met Veronica.
aside from Veronica, are you still in contact with any of them?
I still talk to Veronica. I talk to her 24/7.
Um, did you ever learn about adoption in school?
I'm not sure if I did. Um, that's a good question.
So, like when they were teaching maybe social science
Hmm.
or regular science, did the topic of adoption ever come up?
I think once.
What did they say about it?
Like anyone could adopt, but it takes a lot of practice. And if your parents were adopted, they had to go through a lot of things, and you need to fly to the country and then pay for your plane tickets.
Do you remember what grade level this was in?
I think high, I think high school. I think I was younger.
So, going back to your parents, did they ever explain what adoption was to you?
That I think they did.
When was that?
It was years ago.
Do you remember the context in which they explained it to you?
I remember they said to me was, I know that you have a brother already, but I know you have a brother already, but would you like to adopt you? I think they had all the papers already going in, and then I seen videos people getting adopted through you're officially adopted, and I'm honestly blessed because I think without you or anyone else in my family, everyone would know I wouldn't be adopted.
So, how did Or like when they explained adoption to you, how did they explain it as?
They explain it as it's like having a kid, but you have to raise it on your own. So they had to teach me fine motor skills, and I got held back during first grade, so I had to wait till I was until my brain until I, it's my brain until I developed into doing other things, and then as I got older, I ended up doing other things for myself.
Did they ever go into the legal process or did they keep it mostly about family?
I would say they mostly kept it by family and how family is always like blood. Family is always gonna be support of you no matter what you go through.
Have you ever done any of your own research into adoption?
I have. I do actually. Maybe 5 or 10 years. I want to adopt one day and have a family. So
What have you learned so far?
that 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 being adopted is a that being adopted you you always have to let me phrase that. God God gives you gifts. For instance, I like math, but reading I was kind of my comprehension wasn't that great. But being adopted was I think it was nice to have a family who cared about me and for my success and like you and be like your mom and to everyone else you guys knew I was different, from the beginning I came here. And I always felt accepted. I didn't have to be, judged.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that being adopted has had an impact on your life so far?
I would say yes because people at my job, I work a lot. People can tell I have an accent when I talk because when I was in middle school, I did speech therapy, 7th to 8th grade, and I stopped doing that. But then college, 2015 to the 17, I kept doing it, and so people could notice I had an accent. And it's so lately I've had people where you're from. So I said I'm from Romania. I'm actually adopted, though, and I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to say that I was adopted. It's it's a gift.
Mm-hmm. How does it make you feel when people ask you where you're from?
I'm honestly honored. So
Honored?
hmm like I'm just touched that people like want to know about my life story and they want to listen and hear me out and see what I want to say.
That's a nice take on it.
Yeah.
Hmm. You mentioned that you were interested in adopting. Is there a particular reason why?
I've always wanted kids down the road. I'm still working on trying to go to college soon, but I really want kids one day, and I know adopting is a lot of money, but I think it's worth it in the end.
Hmm. Would you consider adopting even if you had a biological child?
Yes, I would.
Why?
I would treat them as fairly as everyone else, and treat them with the same kind of respect like everyone else does.
You've mentioned several times that you feel blessed to
Yeah.
be adopted. So, do you feel that religion plays a role in both your own adoption as well as your decision or your desire to adopt in the future?
Yes. God always tells that if you know what's best for your heart, and I know my mom, dad, and you guys were very what's the word? Uh, you guys had this nice. You guys are patient with me, and when they adopted me, I'm like, maybe I have a nice family, and I've been here since I was. It'll be almost 25 years. Um, and I've always wanted to see my birth parents, and that's always That's usually in my back of my head. Usually half the time, it's I don't know if they still want to see me, and I wonder all the time about that. So I hope they do, but time will tell.
So, if you're looking to adopt a child, is there a particular country that you want to adopt from?
Romania, definitely Romania,
Why?
because it will because I would like to see how the orphanage was when I because I haven't been back in a while, it's a long time, and if I did adopt from Romania, I would get a girl or a boy, whoever it was. I would treat them, I would raise them and help them in school, and
Between your adoption and present day, have you ever been back to Romania?
I have not.
Why not?
It's a lot of money. I've looked at the tickets on Google, and they're over $700 plus, even more, to go back for one way trip. So,
Mm.
and I'm thinking of going to with Vodka. That way she'd go with me, and then we could go together.
So, you mentioned that Veronica is one of your fellow orphans from Romania.
She,
How did you get in contact with her?
she was in the same orphanage as me, and I met her, and that's when, I think this was before, and that's when we clicked off. And I've been best friends with her since we were 5 years old. We've been friends for 25 years now, so.
Were your parents friends?
Yes. Hmm.
Did your parents encourage you to be friends with Veronica because you were both from an orphanage, or
I would say they just said here's a way to make new friends, and that's when I met her. And I'm like, you know what? I think this will be good. I think this will be good friendship, and it's been good. So
what role has Veronica played in your life?
she's been supportive, kind, really, really just she's been on my side since day one, and so have you guys. And Veronica's been the number one. She's like my best friend. She's been there for me through my upside downs. I always, if something was wrong, I could tell her things, and me and her could just talk about anything else, and it was an easy conversation. It wasn't like not to reading out, but she's always been there for me.
Do you think that your friendship has been influenced by the fact that you're both from Romania, or do you think you would have been this close regardless?
Um, I would said even regardless, even I didn't know she was in the same orphanage, I would have been still close with them.
Do you know anyone else who's been adopted?
Yes, I know a lot of people. I know Anna and Elena.
Who are they?
Anna is uh, Anna's a friend from Veronica, and Elena I recently I it was recently about 6 weeks ago. I recently met, and she's also adopted.
How would you describe your friendship with them?
Elena, I'm not really close with. I Anna, it's about the same. I'm more close with Veronica than they are.
Have you ever talked about adoption with your friends?
I have. I think Elena feels. I know if I should be saying this. Um, Elena feels different to be adopted, or she feels kind of like not ashamed, but she feels, she's different. And Anna, not really. Anna's I don't know Anna that well, but I've hanged out with I've hanged out with Veronica on Elena once, but that was good.
Is adoption something you frequently talk about, or do you try not to talk about adoption?
I try not to talk about it. Some people get touchy with topics like this, or they get a
Mhm.
little, you know.
Right. Or actually, rather, could you explain a little more about that?
Um, some people may feel comfortable talking about because maybe they think, oh, I'm adopted. That means everyone's gonna treat me this way. So
But you mentioned that you felt honored.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why you have such a different outlook?
Um, my parents always taught me that that if you're thankful every day for what you have, you can live a longer life.
So you would credit your parents for why you have such a positive view of adoption?
Yes.
Let's see. Since you are interested in adoption, what resources have you used so far?
I I've been looking on Google to see how long the process takes and how much money will go. I know it won't be. I know it's a lot of money, but I gotta have at least enough to save. I would go immediately to Romania, fly in a plane. I would take Ronka with me likely, and then I would go to the orphanage, I would I would find the kid I want to adopt, sign the papers, and then take them with me.
In terms of research, how much of it do you think you've already done?
Some, but not a whole lot.
What sort of websites or sources have you gotten your information from?
Usually, there's this thing. It's called myancestry.com, and you can see where you're originally from. And so I hear that if you go there, you you'll see who your brothers sisters are. And I've heard this, and I might go. I don't know how much it'll be, but if it's in my budget, I'll do it.
Have you looked at any government or legal sources?
Not yet.
Is that something you're wanting to wait on, or
Uh, honestly, yes, maybe in the future I would do that when it's the right time.
when do you think the right time would be?
Maybe when I'm married, have a husband, and maybe he wants to adopt. Yes, so that'd be good.
Now, let's fast forward a
Okay.
bit and say that you've already adopted your child.
Mhm.
How would you explain adoption to them? Or rather, would you talk about adoption with them?
I would say adoption is you is your original family giving you is giving you another new life, and you will grow from new experiences.
Would you want your child to know that they were adopted?
If they feel comfortable, yes, but if they don't, I'll not mention it.
Mhm. What has your experience been as an adopted child with a biological sibling?
Um, I would say
Or just for clarity, being an adopted child who has a sibling who's the biological child of your parents.
I've already saw this quote. I thought life is like a roller coaster. It depends on how you it depends how you react to it. By being adopted, I think that took me to another look of it, how I saw my life. Because I met you, I met everyone else. I met your wonderful mom, and that all the kindness you guys gave me. That I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe someday I can adopt,
Mhm.
and maybe it'll help me grow as an adult, and I'll be more independent, and I'll have kids.
Do you think that when you're in a public setting with the rest of your family, do you feel that people have treated you differently because you're adopted?
Yes.
How so?
Uh, One of my friends, Elena. Let's just say people throw assumptions at me, thinking I just people think that I I use people think that I'm not honest, and when I'm honest, they get mad at me, and then they throw these occlusions, and then anyways. Um, Usually it's more due to my honesty, and or they think I'm just taking advantage of them, which I'm not. It's how they perceive things.
Taking advantage of who?
They think I take advantage of money, or they think that working in a deli is really great, but it it has its flaws. So
Taking advantage of your parents?
yeah, like they think, oh, you're adopted. That means you have to, and I had to work 10 times harder than other people. Because when I was in school, I was a slow learner, and I had to have it. I've had to have people like a note taker that I could keep at the class. And I knew something was wrong with me when I was young, but I didn't want to like say, oh, because I'm adopted, I didn't want to use that as an excuse, of
Mm.
course. But people think I I everything came easy, oh, money.
Mm.
So
Have you ever talked to your parents about that?
yes, I have.
What did they tell you?
They told me that people will always be jealous of your success because no matter no matter where you go through life, people will always try to make you feel less of a person, and they will try to make you look like you're a bad guy. And I've had a lot happening to me lately, but usually I just let it slide and move on with my life.
Mm. Have you had other people reach out to you about adoption?
Not recently, no.
Not recently,
No.
but they have in the past?
Uh no, not really.
Why do you suppose that is?
I'm not sure.
If you had any advice that you could give either an adoptee or someone looking to adopt, what would you say?
I would say is before you adopt before you before you adopt a kid, make sure to go to the right orphanage, and when I was in the orphanage, make sure you have the right caregivers. I had a lot of caregivers that were wonderful to see me, and when I left, I think they were sad to see me go, but they knew I had to go to family. So I want to make sure when I go through the whole stay of going through adoption, make sure to go to the right agency too. And that way they can go through it and like, hey, at least I did something good. I gave, even though my birth mom gave me up, she did it for a reason. And I'm not mad at her for doing that. I can't. I mean, she did what she was best. So
Mhm. When you say the right orphanage or the right caretakers or the right agency, how do you know when you have the right one?
you can tell, you can tell by in your heart. It feels right. You have a good feeling like, hey, I think this will work out.
I guess, lastly, is there anything else that you'd like to share about adoption?
Um, at first, I was nervous to go to a new change because I was used to being in my orphanage, and I was underfed. I didn't have enough I didn't have enough in there, and so I want to know people. It's okay to be scared of a change, but if you have a loving family like I do, you are gonna get through anything through support, friends, and me, Ivanka, and you guys were part of the best that happened, because if I was a here today, I would still be on the streets. And now the people are still out there. And I feel bad for people who did get adopted, because what happens in 10 to 5 years if they want to pursue something? Are they going to go back to school? Are they going to have money? So,
Mhm. Well, thank you for your time. It was nice having you.
Thank you.